Hello, I'm Miles, and welcome to the Bite Size Marketing Podcast. This is an episode in a series that aims to make marketing easy to understand and simple for businesses of any size to implement. I hope you enjoy. Tone of voice. What is tone of voice? Now, strictly, I'm going to say to you that actually tone of voice can be broken down into brand voice and brand tone. But I'll come back to those in a second, right? Because we're getting a little bit into the minutiae. And of course, this is bite-sized marketing. We're not going to get bogged down with all of the heavy stuff. So tone of voice is all about how brands communicate and connects with its audience. The style in which it does this. It's all about the style. So it incorporated in that will be what type of font do you use? What images do you use? What language? I'm not just talking about whether you use the English language, but are you very formal in the way you deliver your messaging, or are you relaxed? Are you a little bit more fun? Do you use emojis as an example? Things like colors as well. So all of these things sort of come together to form a tone of voice or a public persona, you might describe it as. So I would suggest to you that maybe the way in which to think about a tone of voice is to revert it back to yourself and your personality. You could call it, say, a brand personality, if you like. So let's just take your own self, right? And your personality. When you are yourself, or some people may say the authentic you, I guess, it's easier to be like that. It's more natural. The things come, everything sort of comes a little bit easier to you because you are being yourself and you are truly reflecting who you are. You may at times need to put on an act, right? And create a different persona. And that can be really hard to maintain and to consistently uphold, if you like. And ultimately, it's not really you. And the message that I'm trying to get across here is that people are extremely perceptive, right? And if they sort of smell a rat, or sniff something out, then it's the trust that starts to get eroded. Okay. And I'll add to this. So when people come into contact with you and your brand, you want them to feel like they trust you instantly. So people that these days, and I use these days because we live in a digital world, right, where it's very easy. Everything's at the touch of your fingertips in terms of checking people and businesses out. So the moment someone's aware of you, they're going to look at your LinkedIn. They're going to look at your website. They're going to look at your social channels. And do all of those things align? Do they all tell a similar story? Are they all ringing true? And what I'm not going to say is that people are going to do business because they see that continuity. But let me tell you, if they see that there's not a continuity between your website, your socials, your LinkedIn profile, if it's all looking very sort of disjointed and doesn't really marry or match up, what's happening there is you're causing doubt in the mind of the viewer. And this will erode any trust that they may have, or they may just start off not trusting you and your brand. And then if you like, there stops their inquiring about your company, as it were. So you may never even know that someone has even looked at you, right? Because at some stage they've thought, oh, do you know what? This doesn't sort of ring true. What I'm seeing on the website doesn't align with what I'm seeing on socials, doesn't align with what I'm seeing on the LinkedIn profile or the leaflet that came through the door, or whatever medium you so choose. Okay. So really what I'm talking about here is trust. And that is the nub of what I'm talking today in terms of why these things are important. So, your tone of voice really should affect everything you do. And I think that's what I was just looking at. So in terms of all of your communication channels, your website, your social, any press that you do, print media, your promotional items, it is everything that you do, emails that you send out, your branded clothing that you may wear. Every single thing that you do, you want it to align with the right sort of tone and look and feel, right? When you're looking at me now on the screen, you'll see that I've got a blue top on with my branding. My branding matches the branding that you can see on the surround. The font is a little bit more relaxed, all right? It's suggesting that maybe we are a little bit playful here. The way in which my bite-sized logo has been wrapped in this sort of starburst, again, would suggest that things are a little bit more relaxed and approachable. And I like to sort of think that here at Miles Marketing, we are a little bit more relaxed and approachable. After all, one of my brand values is having a giggle, right? So I'm trying to ensure that everything people see about me and my brand reflects who I am. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth, even though today is about bite size. So let me just go back to what I mentioned very earlier at the top of the show about brand voice and brand tone. Let me just tell you what these are about. You can split these down if you really want to get into the minutiae. So a brand voice is about what's said. Okay, and it's about consistency and building trust. So this needs to remain consistent. So if you're going to set a brand voice, the brand voice needs to be consistent across all communications. If we're talking about a tone we're talking about a brand tone, then we're talking about focusing on the messages and what those messages say. So sometimes the tone can be flexible. As an example, if you are having to issue an email that perhaps was quite a serious nature, even though one of my values is fun, if I had to send my database a serious email about, I don't know, being hacked or a price increase or a mistake that was made, whatever it may be, I would use a slightly different tone in terms of the language and the seriousness in which I conveyed that message versus, maybe a bit of prose on my website. Okay, so hopefully that's a little bit more sort of detail, if you like, about brand tone of voice, a brand voice, and a brand tone. Okay, so where do you start? Well, for me, everything starts, with your why. I don't want to go quoting Simon, right? But if you have no idea what the why is all about, it's really like the nucleus. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning. Why do you do what you do? And I'm not going to spend any more time talking about the why today, but you should keep your why in mind when it comes to your tone of voice. You should also keep your values in mind when it comes to forming your tone of voice. This is all about reflection of you, reflection of your why. Whether you're a personal business or whether you're a brand, okay, it's all about making sure that right at the very core of you is what you want the world to see. So, when it comes down to it, having a consistent tone of voice is all about trust. And, answering the question here, why is it important? It's important because of trust. If people see that there is inconsistencies within your brand communications, then trust is instantly eroded and they won't engage with you. What you want to be is consistent. You want people to really understand what it is that you're trying to get across. So whether you're a personal brand offering personal services by you, I would say that you want to think about, your own personality. So don't try and be anyone else. Whatever your persona is as someone that offers personal services, try and project that into your brand, because that is going to be the most authentic, if you like, way and the most natural way of you coming across and talking to people. So as an example, if you've written some copy for your website, read it back. But I tell you what, read it back out loud. Don't have to read it back to anybody, but read it back out loud and just say to yourself, does that sound like the sort of thing that I would say? Like, is it written in such a way that people can get a real taste of who you are? So, just looking at my notes here. Trying to keep up an act is really hard, right? You can create a persona, it can be done, right? But I would urge you just to be yourself. If you offer a personal service and you are the owner, manager, the bottle washer, the person that does everything, and perhaps if you put your actual name on the brand like Miles Marketing, then you need to make sure that your products and services and what you do, your brand, reflects you. Right, so when it comes down to your tone of voice and your brand, how do you sort of pull that together? And I've written down here, I don't like to use this whole 4 pillars thing, right? But for me, there are 4 pillars that go to producing a really good tone of voice. And they are your why, or your raison d'etre, your values, your USPs, your unique selling proposition points, products, and lastly, the 4th one, your target market. If you consider why you're in business, what you stand for, your values, what sets you apart from the crowd with your USPs, that coupled together with your classic avatar of your target market will give you a really good idea as to how you need to pull together things to formulate your tone of voice. At the end of the day, the understanding your buyer is absolutely key to ensuring that your messaging is correct. And I've just written down a little example here by way of trying to make an example of it. So let's say that you've got a product or service that is targeted at retired school teachers or school headmistresses, for want of a better segment. Maybe they're English teachers, right? You would not use slang. You would not use emojis. You would not use a childish, playful font, right? You wouldn't necessarily use gregarious colors, all right? You would be using a traditional typeface. You would be using the Queen's English, full sentences, making sure all your punctuation was absolutely on point. You see, it's all about understanding who you're trying to speak to. Then making sure that you target them in an appropriate way. I'm going to give you a little tip here as to how to go about this now. And I would recommend within your business, you should appoint a brand guardian. Okay, so somebody who is responsible for looking across all of your business and anything that comes out new, just to make sure that everything is on point and that it really does represent your brand, making sure that not only your tone of voice is right, but your branding's right. A logo hasn't been skewed slightly to fit on whatever it is that's being produced. A lot of people will say, well, Miles, is it that important that I took our logo and I squished it slightly because I didn't have a lot of room with what I was working with. And I'm going to say to you, yes, it does bloody matter, because when people look at it, it might only be slightly squished, but it won't look quite right. And they'll be looking at your website, or they'll be looking at some other reference point and thinking, oh, like they might not consciously think it, but subconsciously they'll think, hang about, this doesn't quite ring true. It doesn't look like the brand that I'm familiar with. Okay, so be very careful about those sort of things. Have a brand guardian. Now you may say, oh, I'm a one-man band. Well, then you're the brand guardian. If you've got staff, right, appoint someone else to be the brand guardian, someone that's enthusiastic. If you haven't got the relevant person in house, then appoint your marketing agency, right, someone like me, to be your brand guardian, to look everything over and just make sure it all fits. Now, where do you need to implement this tone of voice when you actually have one? Well, it's all of your communication channels, right? So let's take social media posts. Make sure that your posts have a consistent look and language and key focus on the messaging. You know, do all your posts look, sound, read? Do they all sort of fit within the persona of your brand? Do they align to your tone of voice? Okay, and I suggest that you look at that quite critically and make sure that it does. Things like emails, you might not think it's that important, but you know, your footer on your email, does that align with what you're all about? The font that you use to send your emails, does that align with who you are? So look at the style, the messages, the images, the offers that you give. Do they align within your email comms? Your website's your shop window to the world. So, you know, be very critical. Does it reflect you? Does it reflect your why, your values, your USP, your target market? And I'm going to come back to something we said in previous bite-size episodes. Stop looking at your website from a selfish point of view. It's not for you. It's for your target market. It's for your customers. Are they finding what they want when they come to your website? Okay. Just gave you a little wink there. Yeah, I did. Right. So print, advertising, press releases, you know, does everything hang together? When people check you out, you know, are they still seeing that consistency? People will cross-reference these days. They've got computers in their hands. So, you know, you give someone a business card, they scan a QR code, they go to your LinkedIn, they go to your website. There's these cross-referencing tools that are really quite handy to sort of validate who you are. So make sure they all align. Now, if you're wondering who the best person is to set your tone of voice, you know, you as a business are absolutely the right person. But if you need a professional, then I would seek out a very good branding consultant. And I would be looking to ask them the specific questions around what they actually create. You're not just interested in someone giving you a logo or maybe adding a strap line or saying that this is your brand color. You want to be really looking for someone who can pull together what I like to call a brand Bible, right? Or traditionally they're called brand guidelines. But these guidelines, for me, like every single business should have one that deals with third parties, because otherwise you get lots of different people with lots of different understandings about what your brand is all about. And it's not their sort of fault, right? If you've got a social media manager, a third party managing your social media, if you've got a PR company managing your PR, if you've got a web design company managing your web design, if you've got a graphic designer managing the production of your product packaging, right? You've got 4 different separate people there that all have 4 different separate opinions, albeit they might be roughly the same. They will all be slightly different, and they'll all be applying their own opinions to your brand. Okay? Maybe I'm talking to someone specifically today about this, right? You know who you are. But, it's so important. It's one piece of work that needs to be done properly. And then it can be passed around to everybody you deal with. And they all know exactly how to represent your brand, how it should look, how it should feel, how it's all there in black and white. There is no interpretation by individuals about your brand. Whew. And what does that mean? It means that you build the trust. This is what I want to bring it back to. Right. So let me just sum things up now and give you 3 nice little takeouts that you can think about today. So the first thing about tone of voice is identify it. It doesn't matter really, right, how in depth you identify it. Just start to identify it. Start to sort of think, if you're a one person band, start to think about what you stand for, what you represent. Just make some notes. All right. And then go to your website, go to your social media and see if they tally. Okay. So don't ignore it. All right. You can always change it in the future. It can be an evolving piece as your business grows and evolves. And it doesn't need to stay strict to all of your target markets. You may have subcategories, and the tone and maybe some of the USPs that you discuss with different targets can change. So be flexible with that. Share it. Share it with all of the third parties that you deal with. And this is one thing I didn't mention when I was talking to you. Share it with all of your staff. I said, share it with all of your staff. Everybody, everyone in your organization needs to understand exactly the tone of your company, because undoubtedly they will be talking to people. All right. And you need to make sure that they're coming across and they're talking in the same type of language that you want your brand to be represented as. And don't forget those top 4 building blocks of any good tone of voice. It's your why, your brand values, your USPs, and lastly, maybe most importantly, your target market. Okay, so there we go. There's a bite-sized approach to tone of voice and why it's important. And it's important because of trust. Thank you so much indeed for listening to this bite-sized podcast. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to contact me. You can email me on miles@milesmarketing, all one word, .co.uk. Or why don't you send me an inappropriate GIF? You can do that on WhatsApp. It's +44 754 069 5785. And however you get in touch, please do let me know what you think of the podcast. Let me know if you put any of these tips into action and what the outcome was. So I hope you have enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.